billion people today, nobody takes it for granted that they cannot get access to the kind of energy that we have. And I want to come back to that because it seems to me we've just missed a trick in the way that we talk about energy. Now, I'm hoping that this is beginning to be put right. I'm sure that a lot of you will have noticed that in the last 6 months to a year, we've seen a whole batch of new books and research papers coming out, which is essentially trying to reposition energy as the means by which we arrive at the sustainable future that we're all so desirous of, rather than energy as the thing that takes us to the edge of the apocalypse. So a new book has just been published called Abundance, which is a fantastic account of how we could turn to a lot of new technologies to deliver improved energy services at every point in the economy, puts access to energy right up there as the principal mechanism of driving prosperity sustainably for 9 billion people by 2050. Doing it obviously in completely different ways, by definition, but doing it as the overarching priority we should have. And that means, of course, we have to start thinking about valuing energy very differently. Now, the first session this morning was all about energy pricing. Valuing energy is slightly different from pricing energy. And it seems to me that's where we're going to have to go when we look at the cultural complexity of getting whole organizations to think through these transformation journeys. When Prometheus first dared to steal fire from the heavens and bring it down to earth, people truly understood the value of fire. And throughout most of the history of humankind, a proper recognition of that value has been absolutely central to every single stage of humankind's evolution. So how do we get back to a sense of valuing energy differently and more intelligently for this kind of stressed out world that we live in? So 2 thoughts very quickly about this. Firstly, we have to work from the assumption today that almost everybody in an organization knows almost nothing about energy. That is the only starting point from which energy managers or anybody charged with responsibility for an energy program inside a company can start. Almost everybody in your organization will know almost nothing. That's partly because of failings at the school level, where to a certain extent, electricity is the stuff that comes out of the plug, and heat is just somehow there, but there is no real recognition of how those services and benefits are delivered to humankind. Not in any way which would be helpful to people when it came to talking through complex transformational programs in which you need to engage the whole organization. Secondly, and you will all be pretty well aware of this, if any energy program remains solely in the hands of the FM or Energy Management Department, then your project is doomed automatically to complete and utter failure. Now, I say that with some authority because there are many case studies which would bear that out. There are some people who think that technology will actually get us through that barrier. I'm very intrigued. I've just got much more involved in higher education at the moment, doing a lot of work with universities right now. I'm very intrigued at the philosophical debate that has broken out in universities about whether they should manage total energy consumption by taking responsibility for it out of the hands of students and staff, by the way, who are much worse than students in universities. Take it out of their hands completely with a command and control set of technology-driven management systems. Absolutely highest possible use of IT to control energy at every point, in every building, and particularly in student accommodation, where they have a choice. Either they can exhort students by switch-off campaigns to do the right thing for themselves and the university, or they take the decision out of the hands of the students altogether, so that every single bedroom, every single common space is controlled automatically, and the students have nothing to do with it. Whenever they leave the room, they take their card with them, all the electrical appliances, the lights go off, students get a bit pissed when their computers turned off for them, but hey, they pretty soon learn at that point that that's what they have to do. big philosophical debate. Because if you don't engage students in the responsibility for managing energy more effectively, have we not missed a fantastic opportunity to get people to think more creatively about personal responsibility against some of these big macro issues that we're facing? So I think we'll see a very interesting cultural issue here. Do people simply take control and take responsibility away from employees, just manage it entirely without any reference to their employees? Or do they say, we're all in this together and let's manage it accordingly? The culture of some organizations lends itself more to the former, and the culture of other organizations more to the latter. So which route are we going to see developing as the biggest driver of change in this respect? And my last comment really is something that has started to come up in a lot of our discussions in Forum for the Future with the companies that we're working with. If this is only about the bottom line, only about saving money, only about increased efficiency to enhance the overall performance of the company, and not really about a wider understanding of corporate stewardship in the world today, then that journey probably has a relatively limited life. So the question for me is, how do we get beyond ruthlessly driven, triple bottom line, cost reduction energy strategies? How do we get beyond that to open up a rather different way of thinking about this? So I'm going to end with a very simple challenge, really, which is we were having a brainstorm the other day with some colleagues, and we were trying to get back to this idea of how do you get people to value energy differently. Stop taking it for granted, to value it for this extraordinary liberatory force that it really is. And you can pretty much guarantee that a cost-driven exercise in reducing energy consumption is unlikely to do that. It may be effective, but it's unlikely. So one of the ideas that popped up was, what about an electron offset scheme rather than a carbon offset scheme? Which is that every reduction in net energy consumption is turned into a positive contribution to people elsewhere in the world that have no access to the energy that we take so complacently for granted. And if those saved electrons, or saved therms, whatever it might be, can then be transmuted into another currency, invested in organizations elsewhere in the world, then how could we increase the psychological uptake, the psychological interest around schemes of this kind? There is a trial of this going on, not that I've seen it personally, in the US at the moment, converting energy saving not just into the money value, but converting it into support for solar projects in developing countries, connected to communities, the people in those communities, the value to the people in those communities, in a way that closes that loop so much more creatively and personally through the screensavers on everybody's computer. But the driver to reduce energy is so much more than the driver to save the next £1,000, £500,000, £1 million. Because there's a level of connectivity built in to what is happening to energy use around the world. So I hope today we can get a little bit deeper into some of the ways in which we can change the culture of energy management so that it has a bigger impact on employees than just another rather grudging commitment to lop off the next £1,000 off the energy bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. My name is Andrew Hill. I'll be moderating the session while the panel is settling. I should introduce myself. I'm the Associate Editor and Management Editor of the FT. As in all situations where journalists are present, I'm the least knowledgeable person in the room on the subject to be discussed, so I won't spend much time telling you what I think. Just three things that I've learned in writing about change management and companies which are pertinent here. One is that even disruption in the form here of energy price changes and energy sustainability, even disruption that's forecast, can be devastating to companies. So even if you know what is coming, I've written about Eastman Kodak in this regard, can be devastating. Second point on sustainability specifically, as you all know, is that now, of course, it's being applied well beyond the sustainability department and sustainability programs that companies have. And most far-sighted companies are embedding this deep into everything that they do. And the third point, which is borne out by the survey you've seen, is that in this particular economic climate, particularly in developed countries, if you link anything within a company to the prospect of growth and not just to cost cutting, you will get the board and executives' immediate attention. So without going through the introductions, you've got bios of all the panelists. Let me introduce Mike Barry from M&S to get the ball rolling with this session.
Thank you. It's always difficult following Jonathan and his inspirational speaking, but let me just try and offer you 5 minutes of very practical insights as to how Marks & Spencer has begun to integrating energy into its strategic thinking. And necessarily this will be bullet points. We want to leave plenty of time for a rich discussion with you afterwards. So forgive the lack of depth here, but let me just offer some observations. And it just goes around 4 key themes. The first is that narrative. Again, Jonathan referred to it repeatedly. The importance of building a narrative within the organisation. He says why energy matters. I work for a shopkeeper. Our job is to shift knickers and ready meals. Trying to talk about energy is a challenge. So we have to develop over the last few years a narrative about cost, yes, but also about resilience, about shifting policy, but also about opportunity as well, to bring it to life and set energy in context. So that narrative that we've built has been indispensable in creating a way of talking about energy right across the business to multiple different stakeholders. Everybody from the fairly obvious chief financial officer, right through to our retail business, our logistics arm, and right through to our product groups as well, and the supply chains. The second important thing you've got to do is emotionally engage people. Again, if all we spoke about was an energy plan to cut energy costs at Marks & Spencer, we would have got some of the distance we have. We've become 28% more energy efficient in our stores over the last 5 years. We would have got some of that inevitably, but we've got further because we've made it emotionally engaging. So energy has been set in the context of overall work on climate change, which has been set in the context of an overall sustainability plan, so people understand the wider context of it. But clearly we didn't stop there. And again, I won't labour the point of the concept of Plan A because there is no Plan B for one planet. We've got as a change management brand to most engage people in all the multiple things that have to change. There's been enormously powerful for M&S. I cannot monetise the value to M&S of having that emotional attachment to a change brand for which energy is sat within. Developing that emotional theme then is important to making sure that every one of our 700 stores there is a Plan A champion. A champion for all aspects of Plan A, but again, critically, energy is an important part of it. They do a day job, a challenging day job in many cases, but they're also pushing and championing energy management there, other aspects of planning, but also bringing back ideas to the centre, which inevitably causes some crazy things to happen. Once we have it explained to us about from the people at the coalface, you can put us right. So that emotional side is very, very important. And then you need to complement it with the third thing, which is about process. So, again, I don't need to labour a point in this room. I think it's well understood and well done in this room, which is about measurement. Introducing those metering and the sub-metering so you can actually measure and manage. I'm sure virtually all of you do it, but I will impress just how important it has been in terms of our journey. The second thing was to introduce the targets. Again, we said to come up with a series of 5-year targets to reduce our energy use and make ourselves more efficient. And again, it might sound a little bit prosaic, but in practice, having those targets that we constantly report on every year has been enormously powerful. We've just stuck with it. I think most people have that now. 1 or 2 people have either targets that are 20, 30 years out, too far, or 1 or 2 years, there's just not enough time to actually operationalise and start to get things to happen. 5 years, but those certainly been the right balance in terms of making things happen. The third thing we introduced then was bonus. Money makes the world go round, it concentrates minds. Every M&S director has a Plan A objective tied to their personal bonus potential each year. That's then driven down to a store manager level, the 700 store managers. A part of their bonus potential as a store manager is they've got energy use in their store. It's a significant part of their cost base. If you can control it, it makes such a difference. From me as well, it's the Trojan horse because once we start to do energy, there's many other aspects of the plan that start to do as well. So that bonusable target is very important to stepping things on. The fourth thing then within the subject section is reporting. And just every year coming out with our sustainability report and reporting consistently against our targets, how we're doing, getting concentrated reminder wonderfully. If those responsible for energy and use know that we're going to go to the public domain each year and say whether we've delivered or not. We're a very public ground. Success or failure is played out in a very public role. And then there's innovation. Again, very important to us has been the use of demonstration stores. Many other retailers have them. People like Tesco, Sainsbury's, Waitrose have done a very good job like us to actually take one store, pack it full of all the innovations. A third of them work brilliantly. They roll it out across all stores. A third more middling. You've got to play with them for a couple of years with demonstration facilities to actually improve them, make them work before you roll them out. And the third will never work at all. They're rapidly burn them in. But these concepts of pilot facilities to inform wider rollout, very, very important. And then the final point about where next. As much as we've achieved on energy to date, and that 28% reduction has been both important in terms of environmental credibility but also in terms of cost base, you never stop. And actually the energy challenge, the narrative I started with, is only becoming more complicated. It's constantly being updated, as we've seen government struggling with inevitably a very difficult policy area, and we're trying to make some long-term policy investment decisions against that. It's difficult. You're constantly working around. So for Marks & Spencer, that branches out not just in terms of our operational energy thought, but also in terms of our supply chain, where much more energy is used in practice in our operations, and also for our customers, where we've started a very successful M&S energy proposition for the consumer. Early days, but that's got the potential to grow. So that's enough for me just to shape some debate going ahead. You need the narrative, you need the emotional engagement, you need the right processes, but you need to be constantly thinking about where next strategically. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. And I'll hand over to our right to John Bentley from IBM. John, thank you.
I've got 6 minutes, and there's an easy and a difficult way to do this in 6 minutes. The difficult way is to respond to all the provocations that John's laid out, and the easiest way is to invite you to give another round of applause to Mike Barry and Marks & Spencer, because in many cases I think they're the example of how do you actually drive change in an organisation. The exam question is how do you change the way an organisation thinks about energy, and I think the first question I have there is it important to change the way they think about energy or the way they act about energy? And I suspect the answer is both. Mike talked about the narrative, being about the way you change to think, performance measures, incentives, and so on, how they act. This debate it gets confused because at one level we talk about the importance of energy from a societal level, even from a world economic level in the way that Jonathan did, and then we drive it right down to a personal behavioural conversation about how individually we use energy. So let's look just at the moment about what energy means at the corporate level. A couple of years ago we did a study with DEFRA. We looked at the energy use of IT in office buildings and the type of buildings that we're surrounded in. 40% of the energy bill is IT. 32% of that is wasted. 60% of the IT energy is outside of the data centre, so it's in control of the workforce. So that means that you can engage people in an office environment. There's an 8 to 10% prize. So what does that mean in terms of pounds, in terms of the things that drive most quoted companies, drive all the behaviour inside organisations like mine? So in the 20 years up until 2010, IBM saved $399 million through energy efficiency measures. In 2009, we set a target to reduce another 1.1 million megawatt hours of energy consumption. By the end of 2010, we were halfway there, another $50 million of savings. And I think in this current corporate climate, that answers the question of does it matter? And that brings me to how do you actually do something about that? And I think really Mike covered most of the points. So measurement, tying measurement to process, being transparent about the measures both internally and externally with stakeholders, tying incentives to those measures. In some respects, I would say that the green aspect of this debate has had an unfortunate side effect in that we start thinking about energy as somehow different. And as Jonathan said, it is different in the sense that it's very life improving, especially for those bottom 1, 2 or 3 million who don't have secure sources of energy, things that we take for granted. But in another respect, it is a resource, and we know how to manage those resources. Organisations been driving continuous improvement programs to reduce costs, to drive efficiency for years, and many of the things that work for those work just as well for energy. I won't talk about engaging staff, communicating the narrative, I think Mike did that already. Perhaps one thing that Mike didn't mention is leadership from the top, and that was true in Marks and Spencer, it's true in our organisation. And at this point, I'm going to disagree with Jonathan. Driving it through process, driving it through measurement doesn't mean that it's a short-term journey. So IBM's first energy efficiency program was kicked off in 1971. It's still running. We still publish an annual report. Our chairman and chief executive publishes an annual environmental report that sits next to the annual stakeholder, the annual financial report to the stakeholders and shareholders of the company. So I think leadership is absolutely key. It's key to telling the narrative, it's key to sustaining it over the long term, and it's key to ensuring that the measurement system does pay attention to it. Two other aspects, I think Mike touched on it briefly, but I know from detail of what M&S do in Plan A and what IBM do is driving up the supply chain, both in terms of how suppliers manage these issues for themselves, but also how they can collaborate with you to take cost and energy out of your organisation. And lastly, I will end again with M&S. I think it really matters that you frame the agenda in a way that matters to your customers. And if there's probably a single golden bullet, it would be that. I'll stop now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. The one person who's by you don't have in your package is David Whiteley from GSH Group, who's nobly stepped in to replace John Daly. David, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. You probably didn't realise that I wasn't John Daly. So 1.2 is better than 10 Preston, so here I am. Slightly different aspect, really, because on some of the hugely important points that the co-founders raised. A bit of context. GSH formed in 1895, so we've got quite a bit of heritage in the engineering services business. We have really evolved, and latterly, through significant investment in technology, we have been delivering energy services solutions to customers. We're all aware that maintenance and the assets within the building and energy management are intrinsically linked issue. And we also know that organisations have a constant drive to reduce energy through very effective technology platforms. Well, this is not about technology for technology's sake, but Jonathan, his example was quite personal about the university where technology has been introduced. Actually, is it adding value to the environment that students are operating in? It may reduce costs, but frankly, is it creating value and ownership to awareness of energy management, of energy management? Three aspects really where I kind of want to touch on. Clearly, technology is around having a very effective platform and systems that are driven by a broad and a strategic vision about implementation and making sure that their capabilities do reinforce the direction of an organisation. Clearly, management information is hugely important. That's one aspect. The second one is how technology should drive operational efficiencies from a purely energy management perspective. Clearly, that has got cost avoidance and cost reduction connotations. And also, how it drives investment decisions around the replacement, replenishment of assets. So the first one around management information, consumption data from smart meters clearly uses technology to provide data around utilization and usage. However, the powerful message there is having visibility and transparency of that data with key stakeholders, end users of organisations, building, the general public. It's a hugely powerful message when people can see that they're making a difference. So making sure that the data is absolutely driven to provide that message that, as I said, as a reduction is occurring, is clearly necessary. So having visibility of kilowatt hours and carbon reduction is cost savings is important. Delivering operational efficiencies through perhaps controls methodology, having sensors connected to those assets that really do drive the data flows enable us to, in real time, manage a building's environment more precisely. Clearly, that also helps with driving through more effective maintenance strategies, and ultimately it does create more efficiency in our operation. Measuring asset performance through technology platforms that are using web or cloud platforms also enable the energy efficiency of an asset and the organisation to understand how the investment options with driving efficiency can be carried out more purposefully. And something that we're looking at is actually better predicting the reliability of assets and failure of assets. Because there's nothing worse than an end user in an office being particularly disgruntled and creating inefficiency in their workspace when something fails. The third one, which is linked by the two previous points around investment decisions, using building modelling, not to create new buildings, but in existing buildings. Over 90% of the building stock is over 20 years old, so why don't we use the software and solutions around software to actually look at a more holistic energy-saving strategy, not just those small projects that occur in proper office space. This generates analysis across daylight assessments, carbon reduction strategies, using thermal and energy analysis about the whole building's consumption of energy. And of course, when you set up that model, through the process of change of that building, you can then revert back to that model to just test and challenge how much energy reduction you're creating by the amount of change you're creating in your organisation. So to conclude, technologies come along the way. We live and breathe technologies, change the way we work. What is the effective use of technologies that's important here, and how it drives strategies from an organisational level, investment decisions, operational efficiencies, and more importantly, behaviours, so that they feel as if they're owning the solution rather than creating energy efficiency. We've got a kind of line in our business, which is around key to sustainable energy consumption reduction, is the ability to monitor and control change promptly and through an effective technology platform.
First, I'd never start planning from scratch again. It would be great. So I would desperately not do that. But hypothetically, if I did, I don't think I would start with war. I think there is a narrative to be constructed at one level down that opens the door for you. So I don't think you can walk straight in there and say, guys, we're doing nothing on energy, let's do something on energy. I think you need to do 2 or 3 things for the board. One is to develop that narrative that is both stakeholder informed with the outside world, is grounded in what your business model does, and is expressed, certainly in our terms, in a monetary way that will connect with the actual board's thinking. The second thing that I think you've got to do with any organisation, or any board, that has to do change, is to show a degree of competency. So what a board looks for is, I've got the right people doing the right things in the right way. So before you knock on that door, make sure that you've got a compelling proposition to the board to say, this is what we're proposing to do now. We've got a narrative to say there's a problem, and here's what we think the solution is. You're going to have to invest X with these kind of skills to deliver the process. And then I think the third thing you need to do is benchmark. We spend an awful lot of time in development planning, really understanding what some very good competitors are doing. I've referenced them already. We've got Tesco, Sainsbury's, Kingfisher, Waitrose, Boots. We're all doing good stuff on carbon already. We benchmark ourselves against them. We took a position that was not a million miles from them, but we believe overall was the leadership position, and then ensuring we consistently delivered it. But it's important that you look at your reference set around you, your competitors and peers, and understand what best practice might or might not be.
John, any thoughts on that? Where you would start? And then we'll throw it to the audience.
So I think for me you have to start with the notion that there's a case for doing this, and whether you call that a narrative or a business case. And then the question is, what do you do next? So do you then take that straight to the board, or as I think like you applied, do you build some capabilities, some demonstrators, build an evidence base behind it? What we did in IBM recently, I think, is a good starting point for many organisations, and I think it perhaps goes slightly against the view that people don't know how, particularly if they don't know nearly squat about energy, they perhaps don't know enough and they don't think about it. We do, unsurprisingly for a technology company, deploy technology, but we deploy it in a slightly unusual way. We have a technology called jamming, which is the notion driven from jazz musicians, a free-form conversation enabled by technology to elicit the views of an organisation. And we ran a jam a couple of years ago called Think CO2, which was about engagement, it was about driving innovation out from the grassroots, and it was about aligning the organisation around the agenda. So I think some form of employee-wide intervention would be early in my list of things to do. And if I can have one final thing, having gone through an organisation with culture change, the thing that drives things the most is what your customers say about you.
Thanks very much. Well, let's do a bit of jamming now. If I can invite questions from the floor, we've got mics. If you can introduce yourselves, and if you want to direct your question to one particular member of the panel, go ahead. Everyone on the second row.
Ryan McNeil, Nestlé UK. We have an energy strategy in the UK across our manufacturing sites, which is focused on technology, specifically going back to the basics to start with, and fundamentally getting metering right, how we're using information. But there's still a gap around employee engagement, I think, and how we get the employees to behave differently at home and not just in the workplace. I just wondered if there's any examples of how a utility provider has worked with a large business to actually work with their employees and provide energy to their employees, and not just to the business, to look at that shared value approach.
Anybody like to think about that? Anyone got thoughts on that? Utilities involving that?
I'm the utility, but I'll offer an observation. We gave all our 78,000 employees, we offered them free loft installation and a free energy meter a couple of years ago to improve their carbon literacy. So they took it home, they could play with it at home. Some people already had it, some people were interested, lots of people took it. I think we gave out some like 35,000 energy meters to our people. So I think that's worked well. We got good feedback from that, then people bring that behaviour back into the workplace as a sort of reinforcement in the process. I would say that having got our people literate and willing to participate in energy saving, from shutting the fridge doors and keep turning the lights off when they didn't need it, that takes you so far. I do think the biggest savings have come from technology shifts and making sure that we apply best practice consistently across 700 stores rather than 10 and anybody else did something else. So people are very, very important to this. We'll never walk away from that. But they complement technology, innovation, and innovations in terms of process rather than replace.
It's true, Jonathan, though, isn't it, that this spans well beyond the corporation. You can't go home and, as it were, switch off the energy efficiency that you've learned at work. If you're not doing it in both places, it's going to have an effect. Is that an indication of lack of engagement? Is that?
I think it's very common that people will take behaviours that they've picked up or been encouraged to adopt at work, and they will take that back home, and they will think about the implications of that from their own domestic, private perspective. We haven't mentioned energy in transport systems yet, but one of the most interesting things that we've been looking at with a big company like Carillion is the huge amount of work they've done on fleet management, using very sophisticated technology to help all of their drivers in large or small vehicles to drive those vehicles in such a way as to achieve really significant reductions in fuel use. And I mean really significant. This is one of the areas where it sounds so obvious you hardly, it's sort of a bit embarrassed even to mention it, but the way people drive company vehicles is one of the most effective ways of getting to shared ownership of the agenda and reduction in the impact and the cost associated with that. And there's no question that report back from all of those employees in Carillion is that there's no way they drive their car differently when they're doing Carillion's business from the way they drive their car when they're using it for family use. They've sort of got the habit, and once you've got the habit, you think, well, actually that's such a sensible thing to be doing, why don't I do it across the board? So I think there is good, strong evidence that shows that behaviours learnt in the workplace will translate into the domestic space in a way that can have an added advantage.
And what about the reverse?
You mean the bad behaviours?
No. Behaviours learnt at home.
The domestic behaviour learns at home.
I can't honestly point to an evidence base as authoritative as the one that I can point to for that.
That's a no then.
Well, I don't want to be depressing this morning, but it's a sort of possibly rather than a no. I don't know. Do you know?
I've heard of schemes that are trying to do that, but I don't have the evidence that they work. And I think that perhaps depends in some part in the kind of contract that you have with the organisation, the extent to which people feel that what they do at work is different from what they do in their life in general.
I mean, just a practical observation on that. I think all our market research with customers, employees tells us that people, as individuals, are very intimidated by change and sustainability. When they feel part of a more collective whole, whether it's, I work for Marks and Spencer and everybody at M&S do a small bit to do this, it works easier. So starting with people as a tribe and then sending them back as individuals is the right way around. Asking them as 21 million individuals to try and generate change individually is, I think, the wrong place to start.
And some companies have used an organizational global action plan to work with groups of employees to achieve exactly that group effect rather than I'm too small, it doesn't make any difference what I do on my own, but if you're working as part of even a slightly bigger collective, then you get a better sense of purpose out of it.
Right. Yes. Five rows back.
Hi, Richard Harkin from BT. I'm interested in the panel's view on the balance between a centralized execution plan that looks at a central team going out site by site across all your sites in your business to change out the existing energy wasting bits of kit with the more energy efficient latest models and the savings you get from that, versus the engagement approach to engage with all employees and all the directors of all the different sites to hold them accountable for energy reduction. And what we've been looking at in BT, which is an interesting dilemma, is that we are increasingly installing smart control networks across our 8,000 buildings. And that, in a way, is taking away the control and empowerment of the individual, because we are now in a central team controlling the lighting, controlling the heating, controlling the cooling, taking it away from the individual, so they can't leave it on. And they can't play a role in it. And there's this interesting balance as where this is going to go in the future as to how you get both areas of that equation to work for you.
And this is very pertinent to Jonathan's point about students having their computers automatically switched off at times of usage. David, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I mean, look, it depends what the ultimate goal. Is it about, Jonathan's point, is it about saving money, or is there a real energy agenda into this? And effectively, the sensors and smart boxes, how are they set? What's the drive to set them? And how are the user occupiers then made aware of how they're used and can they override them? So there's a kind of back to the engagement piece really around the journey of what is the sense of achievement, and it's about using technology in the right way. So you get absolute, as I say, engagement. It's a journey. What is it used for? And yeah, okay, there are set parameters for very good reasons. Anybody who wants to venture out of those for very good reasons surely has the opportunity to do that. And flexibility of controls, I would suggest, will provide the communication and the engagement around philosophy. Certainly has to be close.
The sense of engagement, the sense of achievement is bound to be lower, isn't it, if you know that the computer did it?
Well, I mean, three responses to three examples. Every single one of our buildings has a sensor which can detect an aeration in the room, turns the lights off. There's not a single IBM person who feels fundamentally disempowered by that. Although, you know, if you're the last person, sometimes you have to wave quite a lot every now and then if you're working late. Every one of our buildings has a building management system which the guys running the buildings use, but they're not centrally controlled. And they are incentivised to, you know, run the building effectively and to drive costs. That's a question about providing tools. And then the third example is our fabrication plant in Burlington, Vermont. It's probably the leading edge in terms of its water and energy efficiency. And many of the solutions that have come out of that plant only apply to that plant. They only apply to that plant in that context. And only the people who work there and run it will ever thought them up. So that's about local innovation. So I think all three together.
I mean, Richard, I think your conundrum is that BT is a relative leader. And if I was advising a business at the start of the journey, I would say start with a centralised control. You just get there much quicker. Very, very simplistically, I think there's 25% of your basic energy use that you can save by that simple core, taking control and driving that technology agenda. The next 15%, and that's probably where we've all got ahead of us rather than behind us, is going to come from this human change, this local ability to actually adapt and respond to local need and come up with local solutions. But then the next big step, the 25, 30, 40% that you need on top of that to get the true goal of an 80% reduction in terms of energy longer term, will only come from having a new business model, which is, you know, utterly redefining how you make and sell a service. So those are the three parts of the journey for me. But in terms of where I would advise any business start with what you've done, small team, professionally done it, driving consistency across everything you do, and then do what you're starting to do, which is engage people in local interpretation after that.
Command and control, Jonathan, isn't command and control and we're all in this together aren't usually exclusive.
No,
you set them up, they're rather in opposition.
I was only just opening up a little philosophical conundrum for us all to reflect on rather than anything else. And I would be very supportive of a kind of belt and braces approach to this, really. So Richard mentioned what BT is doing in one respect. You wouldn't be able to do the same, for instance, in the way that BT is empowering Openreach employees to do the same as I was talking about with Carillion through the fleet, which is to think about the contribution they can make to BT's overall energy performance system. And it's a very different approach. I mean, with Openreach, you couldn't basically go in there and just say, here's the deal. You could obviously affect things through procurement, because one of the big things is that the procurement of the transport systems that a company needs, the vehicles and so on, that's a central decision. That needs to be driven by someone who's very savvy about emissions efficiency and all the rest of it. So that's a central procurement decision. We haven't really touched on procurement yet, but it's a fundamental part. And then once the vehicles are procured, or the leasehold agreements are procured, then the empowerment that goes on to get Openreach employees thinking about the way they drive those vehicles has been very impressive. So I think it is both, and you're right, I was just being...
The automatic lights going on and off, there are some columnists at the FT who are so immobile, even during the working day. I won't name names. Yes, this gentleman here and further in.
Hello, Paul Garland from Lafarge Net. It's quite interesting you're talking of technology, you're talking of the connection, and there's 2 points. The first is, it's a very crowded landscape, people's minds and firms and the environment we're in. And so the absorptive capacity of people's collectives, of herds of people and firms is limited, so you can't get the persistence in people's minds and behaviours. So you might have a transient, a change, and then it flips back. And the second, we talk in terms of technology. And I think a key lever isn't being touched upon, and that's about labels, and that's about interoperability and data and standards. The car example is quite a good one. If there was a standard about the data, about the efficiency, and then that became available much more widely and was comparable, then lots of companies could do this. Lots of people could do it. It could be personal, and it could be fleet, and it could be communities. So those are the 2 things.
So what's the question on persistence is how do you essentially keep people's attention with these programs? And your second point?
The second point is how do we get standards in lots of different areas, but I think labels and standards is a point that we have to push.
Okay. Who'd like to take the assistance question and we keep people engaged on this? David,
Well, I was going to go to the standards one.
Oh, okay, we'll go to standards first.
Just to reinforce the point that from a maintenance perspective, going back to the fact that buildings are unique. So to try and get absolute standards across portfolios of buildings, communities, etc., is going to be difficult. Through having a range of technologies that support a more consistent way of receiving data, telemetry, and analysis to enable change to be managed proactively, then you really start to kind of normalise, shall we say, energy efficiency reductions in the way that buildings perform in a much faster. So that's a journey. That's about getting more integrated with technologies rather than just having a silent effect with ineffective technology, I should say, across the uniqueness of buildings portfolio.
Do these standards come from the companies that are managing or offering buildings of this case, machinery and others? I know companies like GE, for example, are offering services related to jet engines, for example, that compare efficiency with power plants, that compare the efficiencies, one of the things. And yet it's always occurred to me, you don't have a GE plant. How do you know what you're doing against somebody who's got a different company?
I think answering your question would give an example. We're talking about vehicles. So the vehicle goes in for a yearly service and it has certain things that are serviced for a sort of years. With buildings it's more reactive and has to be more dynamic because of age, condition, the environment, demand, and shall we say quality of servicing of that particular asset. So standards for using the car that would be a great, hugely powerful position to be in. We knew exactly what we're doing, creating absolute efficiencies in time because it was all that.
But David, we do have a labelling scheme for buildings. Energy performance certificates is a labelling scheme for buildings. If the government wanted to use the scheme it's created to drive behaviour change much more comprehensively and, I've used this adverb carefully, punitively, as in go after those mugwumps who, out of their own analysis about energy use, haven't got to the point that it's quite sensible to save the company a bit of money. Those are the mugwumps I'm talking about. If the government drove that agenda around labelling for buildings, it would look very different. It would be a completely different scene, and people do get it. I mean, one of the great stories was when governments stuck A to E labelling on white goods, and within a remarkably short period of time, the goods that were down in the D&E categories just weren't there any longer. Not because anybody understood anything about energy consumption in those fridges, but they just weren't the kind of people that bought D&E appliances, for God's sake. So pretty soon we ought to have the same. We're not going to move into an E building. That's a break. But the government's not really taking that on. It's got it there, but it's not developing the potentiality of that tool.
Does that partly go into the engagement as well, actually, in terms of getting people to stay engaged? You need these nudges, and I'm going to end up talking about nudging.
Well, it certainly would if property owners found they couldn't let their buildings.
Yeah.
Because people were saying, you must be joking. Why would I buy a crap building like this? Why would I rent a crap building like this? What's the point? I mean, this is just ridiculous if you can't manage your building more effectively. I'm off competitively in a marketplace which will offer me what I want, a quality product in terms of the building, delivering my energy services for a fraction of the building that you're suggesting I should now get involved.
Mike, on the assistance point,
Yeah.
how do you stop Plan A getting a bit weary? No, it's Plan A again. No, Mike Barry again, that's Plan A.
I think you've just got to keep moving things forward. I mean, we set off with a 25% target for 5 years to reduce energy use in stores. We've achieved that. We've now got a 35% target, the same baseline by 2015. We'll hit that, and then looking forward to the 50%. So there is a degree of just driving it like that. There's a constant moving thing you've got to keep chasing. Just on the labelling, because this is actually a fascinating debate. I think the car industry, what's happened with labelling on cars, is a perfect example of how the policy systems lined up with what the customer had to respond to. I fill up my car, I actually do monthly, I don't use the car much, but people use the car a lot. They put fuel in. The car won't be taxed up on it, makes sense. Where I think it works, though, is on new things. I buy a new car. Where it might struggle, and it might be a struggle with buildings, is that most big buildings currently exist, and the ability to actually reduce getting certain old buildings from G to E might be an amazing achievement, but it's an E. Whereas just getting another one that's already built from C to B, that was easy. So I think you start to lose the subtlety about how you can retrofit. But encouraging people to think about the brand new builds that they move into and the way they buy a brand new car, labels do work. I don't believe that labels work on most consumer products because carbon is just not relevant. You know, the suit I wear, the ready meal I buy, we know as professionals there's a lot of embedded carbon in there that we as on behalf of the consumer need to deal with. But in terms of the relevance of the consumer purchasing decision, it is nothing like the fuel in my car each week that the breaks that real.
Okay, time for a couple more questions. Yes,
Hi there, Tim Brooks from Tesco. It's a question really for sort of Mike and John, but to the panel as a whole. Talks a lot about consumer behaviour in their own homes, consumers in their homes, and it's one of Tesco's strategies as well as one of M&S's strategies. To what extent can we influence consumer behaviour in our stores and in the facilities that we run with IBM as well? I'm thinking here it comes into labelling, it comes into EPCs and decks, but also around the light levels in our stores, the temperatures, the amount of chilled food we sell, and 24-hour opening. To what extent are we prepared to, or can we, influence their behaviour?
Since I don't work in a B2C organisation and don't deal with consumers directly, I'm going to answer it because that can be controversial. I think a hell of a lot more than they are. My controversial suggestion would be that there's an awful lot of current wisdom as to how consumers want the environment in stores. And I really am convinced that people want to be frozen by a blast of cold air from an open freezer. I mean, it's not clear why walking around the store is 1 minute being hot, 1 minute being cold, and why that's good, but that's the perceived wisdom. So you know, I'm not sure the how of doing it, but I think the answer is it absolutely can be. You're laughing.
I'm laughing because it's such a good question. I mean, firstly, the Tesco's have actually shown the way forward on this, because what consumers first and foremost are saying to us is, before you start asking me to reduce this weird thing called carbon footprint, I want to see you take a lead. So all the emissions that you can save from better refrigeration, lorries, factories, farms, all that stuff behind the scenes, you take a lead on first. Once you've started to crack that and you've got credibility of meaningful reductions, start knocking on my door and asking me to take part. When you knock on my door, make sure it's relevant. So asking me to read a big sign in a store saying this fridge is now 26% more energy efficient than the last fridge was in there, 1 in 100 consumers might read, but most people in the shop are mission driven. They want to do the shop as quick as they can and get out. So actually asking people to dwell and read an essay on carbon or anything else is actually very challenging. So I actually think the way forward is threefold. First and foremost, it is our responsibility to crack the carbon question on behalf of the consumer as far as we possibly can. We then ask consumers to help us where it's relevant in terms of what they do. Asking them to think about the temperature they wash out this clothing, absolutely relevant. I can't wash their clothing for them as much as they'd love me to. They've got to do it. So I think we've got to be very careful about saying, right, I've done 80% of it, madam. The next 20% I'm going to ask you to join on. It's about putting down food waste, because we're embedding carbon in that. It's about not taking a plastic carry bag. It's about washing your clothing at a different temperature. The end point of it, though, I suspect for Tesco's, for M&S and lots of others, is this exploration of a green energy offer or a green deal for the consumer. Now, what that means for any of us, we are great competitors, but also huge respect for each other. It might be that Tesco's or Sainsbury's or Co-op might be the biggest energy provider in Britain in 10 years' time, because they're fundamentally trusted to offer the consumer an offer in their home that allows them to cut their energy use, to make it much simpler in a way that perhaps the energy companies would struggle to be quite as trusted as Tesco's. So I think sequentially that's the order. Get our own house in order, ask consumers to join us on product-related issues where it's relevant, and then start to think about the proposition we put into the consumer's phone as well. That is the $64,000 question. The retailer that cracks that one will be a very rich one in the future.
We'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid, so we didn't run into the next one with that $64,000 question hanging. We could have spun off about 5 different panels on all the questions that we've tackled. So it just remains for me to thank the panel and wish you good luck for the rest of the day.